Hello, welcome to a very special episode of Gotham. And today we have with us Professor Rahul Mukherjee. He's a professor of Heidelberg University. May I request Professor to introduce yourself, speak a little bit about you, because you will be the right person to introduce yourself, because I may miss something in between.
Thank you. I am a professor of political science at the South Asia Institute at Heidelberg University. Heidelberg University is the oldest university in Germany, which has had the rare privilege of hosting philosophers like Hegel and social scientists like Max Weber. Before that, I taught at the National University of Singapore, and before that I was also at the Jawaharlal Nehru University. So I have taught in India, in Singapore, and now for the last 7 years I am in Germany.
Great. But I came to know that for last 1.5 months you have been traveling all around India. See, now we live in two Indias. One is Modi's India, and another is the India we used to know. So, what does the India we used to know feel? What does it want to say? So, what is your that you have traveled extensively? I would like to know your views on these two Indias.
That's a fascinating question. Some people like to believe that Modi's India dominates. But the other India, which has existed not only after independence but since times immemorial, exists, and it exists in a very lively way. So in the last couple of weeks I have spent some time in Delhi, I was in Bombay, I was in Bangalore, I was in Raipur, and now I'm in Guwahati. As you would well recognize, recently the Congress party won elections in Karnataka. Karnataka, as you know, is a Hindu majority state. All the Hindutva appeals were made, and despite that, the India that we know, I don't want to call it the old India or the other India, but certainly the India that we know, was able to vote.
Our India
Was able to vote for a regime that stood on non-communal lines, and it was a convincing victory. What that tells us is that if civil society and political parties get it right, that India can certainly live. So we can blame Modi's India, we can blame let's say the brute majority that a certain party has gone for certain propensities. I think the other India or our India is alive, and it just requires the state and society to come together so that it can live like it has always lived.
Okay, good, very good. Thank you very much for your brief answer. Now, yes, Karnataka is only one state, but we have seen what's happening in Maharashtra, and the other day some news channels they say that okay, what is happening in Maharashtra may be repeated in Bihar. So Modi's India, the Bharatiya Janata Party, is so powerful. They have money, they have everything. So do you think, how do you see the coming days and months? How do you see the conflict between Modi's India and our India?
Yes, so I have actually called India, or Modi's India, a competitive authoritarian regime in the October issue of the Journal of Democracy. I called it competitive authoritarian following a term used by Stephen Levitsky at Harvard, because there are competitive elements in this situation that have not completely killed democracy, and that you could see in the case of Karnataka, that you have seen in the case of Himachal Pradesh, that you have seen in the case of West Bengal. And yet it is authoritarian because some of the other research that we are doing in our department tells us that there are systematic ways in which public institutions are being undermined and civil society is being undermined as well. So we are living in a situation which is like an in-between situation between democracy and authoritarianism. We are still not in the same situation as Turkey or Bangladesh, but we are not what we used to be, or we are not what many democracies are. We are in a situation where the ruling party certainly has certain advantages, and yet if the opposition comes together, it is able to fight. So I think what the opposition needs to do in this situation is to understand not just why we have authoritarian propensities, because then it becomes a good excuse for the opposition to keep losing elections, but also what the possibilities are within a competitive authoritarian regime to escape the authoritarian propensities of the current regime. And I think if the democratic opposition, to begin with, in every state, because the opposition party at the national level is relatively weak, but you still have a national party. If these parties come together in pre-poll alignments with different parties in the different states, and if those parties come together to work in a very strategic manner with civil society, then I think our India can live.
Okay. Thank you. Now, I have another question to you. The thing is that, okay, one is the electoral politics, where the political parties come in. But apart from the political parties, though of course winning election is a very, very important thing, is because the BJP could do all these things because they are in power. So, but apart from that, see, apart from the political parties, what is happening in our society? How resilient is our India? What do you think on that terms? What would you like to say on that?
I think India traditionally is very resilient, in the sense that in the case of Karnataka, we found that the many networks, the civil society networks that worked very closely with the democratic opposition, which in most cases was the Congress party, was quite resilient, because the Dalit groups came together, the Muslim groups came together, the Christians, of course, had a certain level of sympathy and support. But most importantly, the resilience comes from the fact that the majority of the supporters were actually Hindu. So I think resilience comes from the fact that no matter how much you indoctrinate society with an understanding that Muslims or Christians are foreigners, there is an Indian tradition which is based on a very strong philosophical wicket from times immemorial, which doesn't believe in this othering. So if you go back to Vedanta, you will find that you are not even supposed to find the difference between yourself and any other human being or any other living being. I mean, that is, or any other inanimate object, that is your understanding of realization. So how can you other another religion? Similarly, if you believe in Buddhism, you cannot be othering animate and inanimate objects. the greatest bhakti reformers of medieval India were very progressive personalities. Whether it is your saint in Assam or Shankardev.
Shankardev said, you see, Kukura Srikalaru
Exactly.
Atmaram.
Yeah. So whether it is Shankardev or whether it is Sri Chaitanya or whether it is Guru Nanak, whether it is Kabir Das, it is, and more recently, whether it is Swami Vivekananda or Sri Ramakrishna, none of them have actually said that you should other religions. In fact, the icon of the Bharatiya Janata Party, Swami Vivekananda, many people do not realize, has made the strongest claims to argue that not only should you tolerate other religions, but you have to regard and respect them, because every religion can teach a little bit to the other religion. That is point number one. Point number two is that nature has created diversity, and these different kinds of diversity in nature cannot produce just a single path that will satisfy every human soul. So the best arguments in favor of accepting diversity is a part and parcel of our millennial traditions. So for example, Parsis came to India, they also went to China. Can you recognize any Parsi in China? But you can recognize Parsis in India. I am just giving you one example. Similarly, Muslim traditions in India have also become very Indian. I mean, there is saint veneration in Bangladesh. Many people will call it un-Islamic. There is a Sufi tradition in India. And even I am sure, and I am not a great scholar of Islamic traditions in India, I am sure the Sunni and the Shia traditions in India also have their respected scholarship in India. I mean, Sunnis don't kill Shias in India as they do in Pakistan. So we are living on an inheritance which is automatically resilient. Now, if you want to kill this resilience, you need organization. But you just have to produce an organization that recognizes and that lives with this millennial idea.
You have said something very, very important. I think there are two implications. One is that, you say that, there is an inherent diversity in our society. And this inherent diversity can also be seen in the natural world, isn't it? Yes. So, you think that this millennial, tradition of plurality, pluralistic ethos. So Modi's India will not be able to kill it. What do you think?
Absolutely. Modi's India will not be able to kill it. And the single most important reason which I can point to is from a thinker that the RSS uses as its weapon. It is Swami Vivekananda. I think when Vivekananda was saying, "Can India die?" and he said it can never die, there is a reason for it.
And when he said that India can never die, he was referring to the diversity.
Exactly. So when he said that India can never die, and when he said that India has a contribution to the rest of the world, I think what he was saying was that this millennial tradition cannot die. Because if you look at any other country, even in the subcontinent, if you go to Bangladesh, the proportion of Muslims is greater than in Pakistan, but it has declined. If you go to Pakistan, there are hardly any Hindus in Pakistan. But when you come to India, you find that the proportion of Muslims has not declined. Now, Pakistan was created for Muslims, right? And Muslims could have easily gone to either country. But why did they decide to remain in India?
There are more Muslims in India.
Because this is their motherland. It is not their foreign land. I mean, Hindus did not have the opportunity to go to Pakistan. And this is a very, very important point, that these traditions, I mean the Syrian Christians of Kerala, they are older than the Roman Catholic Church. Now you treat them like foreigners. That does not mean that you should treat the Roman Catholic Church or the Protestants like foreigners. Point I am making is that India has the greatest capacity, and all the realized souls of India realize this. I mean, Vivekananda has said that there is no conflict among the saints. Sri Ramakrishna actually practiced Sufi Islam and Christianity apart from his Vedantic, Bhakti and Tantric sadhanas. And then in Bangla he said, Joto mot toto pot.
Joto mot toto pot.
And people do not realize that Vivekananda is actually India's first socialist thinker. He used the term Daridra Narayan. Much later, Gandhiji called the same people Harijans. People like Bhupendranath Datta, who was the younger brother of Swami Vivekananda, like M.N. Roy and others, actually inspired some of the best leftists in India. How many people know that Binoy Chaudhary, who is the father and mother of land reforms in West Bengal, was a disciple of none other than the younger brother of Swami Vivekananda. So the problem with us is that we haven't dug deeply into our traditions to understand why we are what we are, and we are now trying to import another philosophy of the nation state, which has created huge problems and a lot of bloodshed. So it's like you want to import a problem where the problem did not exist, and you want to kill a tradition of over thousands of years, which is not easy to kill. And that is my greatest ray of hope.
Good.
You cannot kill millennial traditions.
Great. So you said, you have very candidly, you see, clearly you have stated that it's impossible to kill the Indian tradition, which is plural, which is diversity. Now let's come little again to the contemporary time. You have been speaking again and again about the role of the civil societies. You are saying that, okay, role of the civil societies, if the civil societies, and I think referring to Karnataka experience, you are saying that if civil societies and opposition political parties, they come together, then maybe in 2024 it is not going to be that easy for the BJP. Now that you had been to various parts of India, so how civil societies are aligning with the political opposition?
That's a very important question, and I know that you are actively involved in that project, and I'm trying to study this situation. My preliminary understanding of this is that causally it was going to be very difficult to establish whether political party strategies have succeeded or whether civil society party connects have succeeded. And political parties should not get into this debate, because it becomes an egoistic thing. You know, civil society may think that we are great, political parties may think that we are great. I think what political parties and civil society both have to understand is that they have to work together. Now this is one area where the BJP has a huge advantage, because like the CPM in the past, it's a cadre based party, and that party cadre is not even a properly registered organization. So there is a cadre based organization that is working with a certain ideology, which is penetrating through schools, public health and a variety of other instruments into the roots of society. Now the civil society on the other side is very diverse, and it is quite fragmented, and they have many ideologies like the Indian tradition. You know, somebody may belong to a Lingayat Math, somebody may be a Vedantic, somebody may be a Jamaat person, another person may be. Now the important thing is that all of these people should come to respect each other and fight for a non-communal idea. I would even request the Congress party to not peddle with soft Hindutva, because they will lose very badly if they do that. That's not their. So we found that in the case of Karnataka, they didn't, and they won. And there is nothing in the Hindu tradition that should make you feel defensive if you don't peddle with soft Hindutva.
Why should you feel?
Not peddling with soft Hindutva should not make you feel less Hindu, because it is probably the only religion, or if you call it a religion, I mean now it has become like a religion because that is the only name that the English language has. But it's a religion or a convention or a practice
Or a culture
with
or
so
whatever.
many different doctrines and faiths that some of those doctrines might even look closer to Islam, and some of them might look closer to Christianity. I mean, there are so many debates about. So the important thing is that just like we have respected diversity, we can have one enemy, and that enemy is a communal enemy. And the forces that are non-communal, which does not mean that they should only be atheistic or agnostic or secular in the French way, but secular in the Indian way, in the way the Indian constitution defines it, that you respect everybody.
Yes.
Respect the agnostic, respect the atheist, respect the bhakt, respect the dualist.
You have your own understanding, you have your own faith, and then you respect others.
Yes, I mean you go to Bodh Gaya. There is the place where the Buddha attained enlightenment, and next to it there is a mosque and there is also a temple. Nobody says that there is a problem with any one of these things, right? So this is your tradition, and from that perspective, you can, as a social force, come together, and especially the social forces that are working on the ground. I mean, it could be Dalit organizations, it could be different kinds of associations that are even based on ethnic grounds, but who serve the people. They have to come together and then produce a common platform, which they were able to do in the case of Karnataka.
Okay,
Now, what works is, sometimes, when there is anti-incumbency, then it becomes easier for civil society to make its work prominent. Yeah.
Okay. So you said that, okay, this civil society has its own space. Political parties, they have their own space. So there is no question of competing with each other. Rather, they should play their respective role, and they should come to an understanding against the communal forces. Do you mean that?
Yes, and I not only mean that, I actually have seen that. So all the people who supported mostly the Congress party in the networks in Karnataka and sometimes even the JDS were clearly not party-based organizations. So it is not that the Jamaat felt that they are a part of the Congress party. They want to remain separate. It is not that the Christian organizations feel that they are a part of the Congress party. It is not that the Dalit organizations feel that they are a part of the Congress party. They want to keep their independence, and the Congress party should respect it.
And still want to.
And they want to, and it's like an internal urge to support something with which the party comes together. Now, in the past, the Congress also had a Seva Dal, and that could be a longer term project to create a Seva Dal with an ideology which is an antidote to toxic communalism. But in the absence of an activated Congress Seva Dal, I think just the diversity of civil society organizations and their ability to convince themselves that they don't want to fight non-communal forces will, in different states, produce very good results for the old India.
Good, great. Now, we have almost come to the end of this interview. Now, if on your own you want to say something, say for half a minute or so.
Yes, I think the most important thing right now is for political parties to understand that pre-poll alliances will be very important. I mean, the democratic opposition against the competitive authoritarian regime is not politically so strong. See, there is financial problems, there are organizational problems. So I think there has to be a lot of give and take, and an understanding that this is almost a critical juncture in the history of India. So pre-poll alliances will be very important. People's ability to give up their personal gains will be very important, because a lot is at stake. And then also working very closely with civil society will be very, very important. In all of this, I think and especially for the Congress party, I think the central high commands working sympathetically and in an embedded way with the party structures at the state level, trying to strengthen them, not trying to take away from their strength, is also going to be a very critical factor, which at least in the case of Karnataka it seems worked very well. So it seems that the Congress party has the ability to, because it is the national party, it will have to work with many other state level organizations. So if we can have the best of all the possible worlds, I think India has a fighting chance to certainly emerge as a very powerful network of parties. I am not sure whether it will be the ruling network, but much will depend on how much political leaders can give up their egos for preserving the old India.
Thank you very much, because I hope whatever you said, your concluding remarks about the political parties and particularly for the Congress, I hope when they watch this interview, they'll pay heed to what you said in your concluding remarks. And thank you very much for your
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure.
Interview
It's
for
a pleasure.
sparing time to be with us. Thank you very much.